Welcome to Duo Reads, where we decode deal ideas and break down big books one page at a time. Today, we're unlocking some truly fascinating insights from Daniel Goleman's groundbreaking work on emotional intelligence. You might, like many of us, think that intelligence is mostly about IQ, those test scores and raw cognitive power. But what if our ability to understand and manage our emotions and the emotions of others is actually far more influential, like in shaping our lives, our success, and maybe even our health? From surprising everyday moments to critical life choices, we're going to explore what it truly means to be smart about ourselves and, well, the people around us. So let's jump right in. We often define ourselves as Homo sapiens, the thinking species. But Goleman really challenges that. He argues that our passions can very easily overwhelm our reason. What does that look like in practice?
It's a really profound shift in perspective, actually. What's fascinating here is this idea that emotions very often hold sway, even over what we consider our superior rational mind. The tragic story of 14-year-old Matilda Crabtree, for instance, whose practical joke tragically led to an accidental death. Well, it really illustrates how our ancient emotional responses can be totally mismatched with modern dilemmas. Our emotional repertoire, as the source puts it, it's often still tailored to the urgencies of the Pleistocene, kind of like we're running Stone Age software on modern hardware.
That's a powerful image, our emotions being stuck in the Stone Age. So when that happens, when emotions just take over, what's actually going on in our brains? I remember reading about a specific part, like an emergency switch.
Exactly. Our brain has this incredible, lightning fast alarm company, as Goldman describes it. That's the amygdala, a small almond-shaped cluster deep inside. It sends urgent, immediate messages to every major part of the brain, triggering those classic fight or flight responses. And here's the crucial part. It often fires before our thinking brain, the neocortex, has even fully processed what's happening.
So it's like our emotional alarm system has a super fast emergency line,
Yeah.
bypassing the main office altogether.
Precisely, yeah. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux's revolutionary research shows these emotional pathways literally bypass the neocortex, our higher-level thinking brain. Sensory information comes in, hits a kind of relay station called the thalamus, and then bam, it takes a direct shortcut straight to the amygdala. That direct route explains why emotion can just overwhelm rationality. It's why that intense, unbidden gut feeling in a snowstorm, the one that led a researcher to pull over just before a collision, can save a life. It gets there first.
It makes perfect sense when you put it like that. And what are the implications of this emotional override? We've all experienced that feeling, right? Just not thinking straight when we're upset.
Yes, that's exactly what's going on. When strong emotions surge, whether it's anxiety, anger, or even deep sadness, they can create what Goleman calls neural static. This static actually disrupts our prefrontal cortex's ability to maintain working memory, which is, essential for focused thought and learning. So when we're overwhelmed emotionally, our cognitive functions genuinely struggle. It's not just a feeling, it's physiological.
Wow. Okay, this really begs the question then. If our minds are so often guided by these powerful, impulsive emotional systems, how much does traditional intelligence, our IQ, really matter in the grand scheme of things?
It's a fundamental question, isn't it? The material suggests we effectively have two brains, two minds, and two different kinds of intelligence, rational and emotional. And the core insight here is truly profound. Our intellect, our traditional IQ, it really can't shine, it can't work at its best without emotional intelligence. They aren't separate things, really. They're more like interdependent partners in how we navigate the world and truly thrive.
That's a pretty radical idea that our emotions can essentially hijack our thinking brain and that IQ isn't the whole story. Because our sources suggest IQ contributes only about 20% to life success. Yeah. That leaves a massive 80% for other forces.
Hmm.
Can you tell us more about what these other forces might be?
Yeah, and we see this illustrated pretty consistently across various studies. For instance, there's that anecdote of a student with, perfect SAT scores who still took almost 10 years to finish college. And a Harvard study, tracking men from the 1940s, found that the guys with the highest college test scores weren't necessarily more successful later in life. Not in terms of salary, productivity, relationships, none of it, really.
So even valedictorians, who are obviously brilliant academically, might hit a wall when it comes to real-world challenges.
Precisely. The research shows that while valedictorians are exceedingly good at achievement, in that structured academic sense, they might struggle more with the vicissitudes of life, the unpredictable ups and downs. Knowing someone's a valedictorian tells you a lot about their test-taking skills, sure, but very little about how they'll react when life throws them a serious curveball.
Right. So this suggests emotional aptitude isn't just another skill, but almost a meta ability, as Goleman puts it, something that determines how well we use all our other skills, including our raw intellect. Does this imply that even from a very young age, emotional control is more critical than we typically assume?
Absolutely. Take the famous marshmallow test. You probably know this one. Children who, at age 4, could delay gratification waiting for that second marshmallow instead of gobbling the first one right away, they had dramatically higher scores on their SATs years later. We're talking a huge 210-point difference. This ability to self-regulate, to manage that impulse, was twice as powerful a predictor of SAT scores than their IQ score at that age. It strongly suggests emotional intelligence contributes powerfully to intellectual potential quite apart from IQ itself. It's not either, it's both.
That's astonishing, a 210-point difference. Okay, so if these other forces, this emotional intelligence, are so critical, what are the key components? Peter Salovey's research maps out 5 distinct domains, right? What's the first one?
He starts with self-awareness, the classic know thyself. And it's truly fundamental because it's the ability to be aware of your feelings as they actually happen. Without this, we're basically flying blind emotionally. Goleman describes alexithymics, for example, people who literally lack the words for their feelings. They might say they feel awful, but they can't tell you if it's anger, sadness, or anxiety. Imagine trying to manage something you can't even name. It's foundational.
Okay, that makes sense. And once you can name it, what's next?
The second domain is managing emotions, handling feelings appropriately. This includes the capacity to soothe oneself, to shake off anxiety, gloom, or irritability, and also to bounce back far more quickly from life setbacks.
That sounds like resilience, which is just incredibly important. Okay, what about driving us towards goals? Does emotion play a role there?
Definitely. That's the third domain, motivating oneself. This is about marshaling your feelings, your emotions, in service of a goal. Think of Olympic athletes or world-class musicians. They demonstrate an incredible ability to motivate themselves to pursue relentless training routines, often starting really young. Their passion fuels their discipline, their drive.
Got it. So that's all very self-focused. What about how we interact with other people?
That leads straight to the fourth domain, empathy. This is the ability to recognize and, crucially, understand others' feelings. He mentions Judy, a 4-year-old in a preschool study, who had this perfect social map of her class. She just knew who liked whom, who felt left out. An exceptional level of perceptiveness. And this skill is vital in everything, right? From sales to teaching to diplomacy. Really understanding where someone else is coming from.
And then finally weaving it all together into relationships.
Right. The fifth domain is handling relationships. The art of relationships, as the source calls it, is largely a skill in managing emotions in others. These are the abilities that undergird popularity, leadership, and interpersonal effectiveness, making people what Goleman calls social stars. They just know how to connect and influence smoothly.
This is great for understanding what emotional intelligence is.
Huh?
Now let's get practical. How can we better manage some of those really challenging emotions in daily life?
Okay, yeah. A great place to start is anger. Dolph Zillman's research is fascinating here. It shows that ventilating anger, just letting it all rip, is actually one of the worst ways to cool down. Outbursts actually pump up the emotional brain's arousal, leaving people feeling more angry, not less. Distraction, like watching TV or reading something engaging, is way more effective because it literally stops that angry train of thought. The best strategy seems to be cool down first, then address the issue constructively.
That's so counterintuitive for many people who think they need to vent or get it out. Okay, what about anxiety? We all worry, but some people get stuck in that loop, don't they?
Yeah, chronic worrying. It's aptly described in the text as an endless loop of low-grade melodrama. While a bit of worry can anticipate dangers and prompt problem-solving, chronic worriers often just simply ruminate on the danger itself without actually moving towards solutions. Psychologist Thomas Borkovec suggests some simple steps. Self-awareness to catch worries early, challenging those worried thoughts like, are they really realistic, and actively doing something to induce a relaxed state. It's about breaking that mental cycle.
Okay, breaking the cycle. And finally, sadness or melancholy. How can we manage those heavier feelings effectively?
Well, sadness isn't always bad. It can provide a reflective retreat from life, allowing for mourning and adjustment after a loss, for instance. However, just staying alone when you're down often only adds a sense of loneliness and isolation, making things worse. Socializing can help, but only if it genuinely distracts from the rumination. If going out just gives you another chance to mull over what put him in the funk, it actually prolongs the bad mood. The key seems to be finding distractions that truly shift your focus and mood, like an exciting sporting event or a really funny movie, rather than just offering a backdrop for more gloomy thoughts.
Right, finding genuine distraction. So on the flip side then, what about the empowering part? The surprising medical benefits of positive feelings. This is where it gets really tangible, I think.
Oh, it's absolutely vital. Take optimism and hope, for instance, defined as believing you have both the will and the way to accomplish your goals. Studies show these are incredibly powerful forces. For example, in one study of heart attack survivors, optimism was a better predictor of survival than any medical risk factor, including how badly the heart was damaged or their cholesterol levels. And it's not just about health. The source mentions optimistic insurance salesmen seeing a massive 37% boost in sales in their first couple of years. That's a clear, quantifiable link. Optimism isn't just a nice to have, it's a genuine performance multiplier.
That's fascinating. Optimism is a performance enhancer.
Right.
Okay. And then there's the concept of flow states.
Right.
What's that about?
Flow. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's concept. It describes that state of deep concentration where the demands on them are a bit greater than usual and they're able to give more than usual. You're fully absorbed. It's that delicate zone between boredom and anxiety where learning and performance are optimized. And when you're in flow, even hard work feels refreshing or replenishing. It actually requires less cortical effort. It's like the brain's optimal performance zone.
That sweet spot. Okay. Building on that, let's connect this back to the bigger picture of human interaction. Empathy, in particular, seems foundational to how we connect with each other.
Absolutely. The core of empathy is reading nonverbal cues. Tone of voice, gesture, facial expression. Robert Rosenthal's PONS test, which uses videos with muffled words to assess this ability, really confirms how important it is. And it starts early. Even infants show sympathetic distress, crying when they hear another baby cry. It seems innate. And crucially, the research suggests parental discipline that calls strong attention to the distress their misbehavior caused someone else, like saying, look how sad you've made her feel, instead of just, that was naughty, really fosters greater empathy in children as they grow.
So if that's what empathy looks like when it's present and nurtured, what happens when empathy is noticeably absent?
Oh, the lack of empathy is truly telling, as Goleman puts it. In certain individuals, particularly criminals like psychopaths, rapists, and child molesters, it's what enables them to tell themselves these awful, self-justifying lies like, women really want to be raped, or I'm not hurting the child. It shuts off the victim's humanity. Goleman shares that chilling example of Pharaoh, a 17-year-old gang member who showed zero remorse for crippling a mother and child in a drive-by shooting. He could project this look that just screamed he didn't care about anything, not your life and not his. However, there's hope. Some treatments for offenders now focus specifically on building empathy, maybe by showing victim impact statements. Yeah. And sex offenders who went through such programs had half the rate of subsequent offenses, so it can be influenced.
That's a powerful intervention. And it's not just about these extreme cases or grand acts of empathy, right? It's also the subtle emotional contagion that shapes our daily interactions. When we're with someone, our moods can just sort of sync up.
That's exactly right. Ulf Dimberg's research shows our facial muscles subtly, unconsciously mimic the expressions of people we observe. It's automatic. This mood synchrony often determines whether you feel an interaction went well or not. It's like this invisible dance, a synchrony, a transmission of emotions. This coordination of moods is the essence of rapport, Goleman says, the adult version of the attunement a mother has with her infant. We literally catch feelings from each other.
Wow. Okay, so what does all this profound understanding of emotional intelligence mean for how we live and work every day?
Right.
Let's start with a really common workplace scenario: giving and receiving criticism.
Yeah, that's a big one. In the workplace, destructive criticism, like a manager sarcastically saying you're screwing up, it actually backfires. It just creates anger, defensiveness, and helplessness in the person receiving it. And artful critique, on the other hand, focuses specifically on what was done wrong, offers concrete solutions, and crucially, is given with empathy. The goal is to create hope for improvement, not just tear someone down. It avoids character attacks and stays specific.
That's such a practical takeaway for anyone managing people or even just collaborating. What about navigating diversity in teams or organizations? That's another tricky area.
Definitely. When it comes to diversity, prejudice is described as a form of emotional learning, often picked up in childhood, which makes it really deeply ingrained and hard to shift just through logic. The source mentions that huge $54 million class action suit against Denny's for anti-Black prejudice. It highlights how subtle, often unconscious biases can persist even when people state beliefs to the contrary. The key, it seems, isn't just trying to change individual attitudes directly, which is tough, but changing the norms of a group, maybe from the top down, to actively suppress expressions of bias, make it unacceptable within the culture.
So it's about shaping the group culture and expectations. And speaking of groups, how does emotional intelligence play into team performance? What we might call group IQ.
In today's world, especially in the knowledge economy, teamwork is absolutely paramount, right? A study at Bell Labs, for instance, looked at their star performers among scientists, already brilliant academically. What distinguished the stars wasn't a higher academic IQ, but their emotional IQ. They were better at motivating themselves, sure, but critically, they were much better at working their informal networks into ad hoc teams. They knew how to build rapport and collaborate effectively. This highlights that group intelligence, or maybe group effectiveness, is largely a function of social harmony and smooth collaboration, which relies heavily on EI.
One of the most surprising and frankly vital connections that Goleman explores is how profoundly our emotions are intertwined with our physical health. This isn't just about feeling good mentally, it has measurable medical consequences.
It's an incredible field, yeah. It's called psychoneuroimmunology, or PNI. It literally explores how the brain talks to the immune system. David Felton's research, for instance, actually showed direct nerve connections from our autonomic nervous system right to immune cells, like lymphocytes and macrophages. It allows them to signal back and forth constantly. This means our nervous system, which carries emotional signals, is absolutely essential for proper immune function. They're deeply linked.
So this means negative emotions can literally make us sick, or more vulnerable, at least.
They absolutely can. Chronic anger, for example, is shown to directly damage the heart. Dr. Redford Williams found that hostility was a stronger predictor of early death than smoking, high cholesterol, or high blood pressure. It more than doubled the risk of cardiac arrest in people who already had heart disease. And stress itself, chronic stress, clearly compromises immune function. It makes people more susceptible to viral infections like the common cold. Sheldon Cohen's study was definitive. 47% of those with the most life stress got a cold after exposure, compared to just 27% with little stress. Even depression, while maybe not directly causing illness, definitely impedes medical recovery and significantly heightens the risk of death in people who already have serious conditions. The mind-body link is undeniable.
Wow, that's a heavy toll indeed. But it sounds like the reverse must also be true then. What about the healing power of positive emotions and, importantly, social support?
The benefits are just as profound. Optimism and hope offer corresponding benefits to what we just discussed about negativity. They seem to bolster resilience. But perhaps the most powerful finding reported is on social support. One study looked at bone marrow transplant patients, a really tough procedure. It showed a 54% survival rate over 2 years for those with strong emotional support versus just 20% for those without it. That's a massive difference. And Dr. David Spiegel's famous work with women with advanced breast cancer found that those who regularly attended support groups lived, on average, 37 additional months compared to 19 months for those who didn't. That's a survival gain beyond the reach of any medication available at the time. The source sums it up beautifully. Compassion, connection, it turns out, is actually good medicine.
That's an incredibly powerful message. Okay, so if emotional intelligence is so crucial for our success, our health, our connections, how do we actually get it? Is it something we're just born with, or can it be learned and improved?
That's the hopeful part. The good news is our emotional capacities are not a given. They can definitely be learned and improved. The brain is remarkably plastic, especially in childhood, but even later in life. Family life is our first school for emotional learning. Parents who act as emotional coaches, tuning into a child's feelings, helping them label them, and find positive ways to soothe themselves. Those parents tend to have children who are better at handling their own emotions, they're more popular with peers, and they even have higher achievement scores in math and reading. Emotionally adept parenting leads to kids who are more relaxed biologically, with lower levels of stress hormones.
So our early environment really does sculpt our emotional pathways. But what if a child has an innate temperament, like being really shy or timid? Is that just their destiny?
Not at all. Jerome Kagan's research on temperament shows that even innate traits like timidity can change significantly over time. Parents who gently encourage timid children to learn how to cope with mildly upsetting moments rather than always overprotecting them actually help them grow bolder and less fearful. This really highlights the brain's great plasticity in childhood. Synaptic connections are constantly being pruned and strengthened based on experience. We can literally help rewire our kids' emotional responses and our own.
And what about deeply ingrained emotional responses, maybe from trauma? Can those be relearned too? It seems like those would be harder to shift.
Yes, even traumatic memories, like those seen in Holocaust survivors or children who've experienced terrible events like school shootings, can deeply imprint the brain. They can lead to persistent trauma responses like hypervigilance or flashbacks. However, through processes Goleman calls emotional relearning, the prefrontal cortex, our executive brain, can learn to actively suppress the amygdala's command to the rest of the brain to respond with fear. This allows individuals to eventually let go of learned distress patterns. It takes work, often therapy, but it's absolutely possible. It's a real testament to the brain's capacity for healing and change throughout life.
This leads to such a powerful conclusion. If early experiences truly sculpt the brain in these profound ways, and even later learning is possible, then schools have a massive opportunity, maybe even a responsibility, to teach emotional literacy right from a young age.
And it seems desperately needed. Goldman Sachs data is suggesting that worldwide, children are more troubled emotionally than the last generation, with alarming rises in things like aggression, depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. This signals sweeping deficits in emotional competences. That's why programs focused on social emotional learning, SEL, are emerging and showing real promise. Things like conflict resolution. The Resolving Conflict Creatively program, for example, teaches students many choices for dealing with conflict besides passivity or aggression. Schools using it saw significant drops in fights and reported improved caring among the kids. Student mediators learned to think differently about disagreements. PATHS curriculum. This program explicitly teaches impulse control, recognizing feelings. It has 50 lessons just on different emotions, and learning to tell the difference between genuine hostility and, say, an accidental bump or a misperceived slight. Preventing depression. There are programs that teach children more productive ways of looking at their difficulties. Cognitive reframing, essentially. Like thinking, I'll study harder next time instead of, I'm just stupid after a bad grade. These have apparently cut the risk of depression in half in some trials. Preventing eating disorders and substance abuse. These issues are often linked to an inability to distinguish and soothe distressing feelings, leading people to self-medicate with food, drugs, or alcohol. Teaching these basic emotional regulation skills can potentially remove the impetus for substance abuse in the first place.
And the impact isn't just theoretical, it's tangible. There's that powerful story of Lamont, a student who learned the SOCS method, situation, options, consequence, solutions, in high school. After being shot later in life, he whispered to his former teacher, "Shrive, when I get out of here, I'm going to use the SOCS method."
Yeah.
It stuck with him. And we've seen data showing steady drops in school suspensions due to fighting after these kinds of emotional literacy classes were implemented. One school apparently saw a drop from 106 suspensions down to just 26 in a single year. These skills aren't just nice-to-haves. They're for surviving and thriving. So we've explored how emotional intelligence, this whole package of self-awareness, managing our feelings, motivating ourselves, empathy, and handling relationships, is really far more than just a soft skill. It seems fundamental to our success, our health, and maybe most importantly, our ability to connect meaningfully with the world and each other.
Which truly raises that vital question at the end. Given the profound impact of emotional intelligence across every single facet of life and the proven effectiveness of teaching these skills, shouldn't we be teaching these most essential skills for life to every child now more than ever? Just imagine the implications, right? For individuals, for families, for society as a whole, if every child were equipped with this vital form of intelligence right from an early age, it really could change everything.
Absolutely. A powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on Duo Reads. We hope this exploration has given you some new insights and perhaps some useful tools for navigating your own emotional landscape. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into ideas that matter.